Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining me with Howard University School of Social Work. And we are going to discuss uh, a really important topic, obviously, mental health. Thank you for joining me for The Struggle is Real with Howard University School of Social Work. So, we're going to really talk about mental health. January is considered also Mental Health Awareness Month, where we are focusing on restarting, rejuvenating our lives, and really diving into mental health. So, thank you for joining us with Howard University, BlackDoctors.org. We truly appreciate your presence and you all being here. So let's get started. All right. So, welcome. My name is Madison Myrick. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. I am a Howard University alumnus. I got my bachelor's degree from Howard University and my master's in social work as well from Howard University School of Social Work. So, shout out to Howard. Glad to be a part of this amazing legacy. Currently, I am a corporate clinician, so I am in the corporate setting and I work part time as an adjunct professor for Howard University School of Social Work. My field of practice is agency based education. All right, so let's check in. This is a time that I'd like to check in with everyone. I know that people are joining us, tuning in on Facebook Live, which is really amazing. I love that everyone is here and basically tuning in with BlackDoctors.org and Howard University. But I'd like to check in and see how everyone is feeling. So I have a check your battery. Because it is a Tuesday afternoon, you might be having lunch, you might have just had lunch, and you might just need to check in just for some form of self care. So let's do that. So, are you feeling great? Are you feeling good? Are you just feeling okay? Are you currently struggling or running low or even feeling empty? So, feel free to respond with words. Feel free to respond with a associated color emoji, if you will. Feel free to let us know how you are feeling. I really love this check your battery because it not only allows us to check in, but it also tells us how we can be in attune and also practice self care if needed. Okay, so if you're feeling great, keep meeting your needs and practice gratitude. That's always helpful. If you're feeling good, practice mindfulness by noticing how this feeling shows up for you in your body. So, see how you're feeling in terms of body wise. Practice self care if you're just feeling okay. Practice self care and find small ways to improve throughout your day. So, maybe small pockets of things that bring you joy or bring you some subtle satisfaction. If you are struggling, show yourself some kindness, give yourself some grace, give yourself compassion. It is Tuesday, you might have just started your week, or maybe you're ending your week, but allow yourself to give yourself some grace and connect with someone. Thank you for checking in. I see someone checked in the chat and said, they need to get back to their routine of self care. So I'm glad you're able to recognize that and acknowledge that. And so if you need to do that, think about what that looks like. Okay. If you are struggling, I'm sorry, if you are running low, focus on good things and avoid unnecessary stress. So anything that triggers you or provides you that stress, be sure to try to avoid that and really focus on connecting with others that can help you feel okay or get connected with self care. And if you are feeling empty, this happens. Sometimes we are, running low or we're feeling empty. Take time to rest. Rest is really important. It's something that we feel, sometimes we're just like, oh, that sounds so cliche, but it really doesn't. It really helps us to recharge. It helps us set boundaries around things that you do, want to either attain or helps you recognize things that drain you. So, I'm glad you're able to check in. I hope this was really helpful for you today. And as we move along through our presentation of mental health, feel free to continue to check in. I would love to hear from you. Okay. All right. So moving on. So, of course, our topic is mental health, a mental health overview in the Black community. So, as we know, mental health can be considered a stigma amongst African Americans, Black Americans. And so it's important to consider mental health as Black Americans uh, view their experience through historical and a cultural lens. And so we like to identify that and see that as how resilience is in the face of in the face of our environment in terms of mental health. And sometimes in the Black community, we can view resilience as either a positive or negative experience. So I want to get some feedback in the chat for you. How do you define resilience with Black Americans and mental health? What does that look like for you? Or how would you define resilience? And the next point of reflection is, do you view resilience as a positive or negative term when referencing mental health in the Black community? Because resilience may not look the same for everyone. So I want to acknowledge that point as well. How do you define resilience? Anyone in the chat want to share? And if you're thinking about it, that's okay too. And do you view resilience as a positive or negative term when referencing mental health in the Black community? Okay, I want you to continue to reflect with that. Oh, thank you for responding. I see someone said positive. Okay, that's great. So sometimes, people in the community, in the Black community, can view as resilience as positive. I believe our community endures and accepts challenges beyond our control. Wow. So thank you for sharing that point as well. Um, and we'll talk about that, how that's rooted in our history as well, and rooted in our culture. So sometimes resilience can obviously be a positive experience where we're able to overcome things. But a lot of times I've heard from clients and the community, I've gotten that feedback of, yes, it is important that we do coin the term resilience, but sometimes that has pushed us, or they felt pushed that they had to overcome things that are beyond their control, or even overlook certain things in terms of not prioritizing self-care or doing what's best for them. So we'll get into that a little bit. Okay. So just continuing that overview, resilient is not just about strength, it's also about progression. So when we look at resilience, we want to remember to, we don't want to ignore certain things, but we also want to see how we can be proactive and continue to move forward. So ways I want to identify some ways that the Black community has progressed in mental health, because we are going to talk about the disparities. We are going to present some facts, but let's talk about how we progress. So in social media, the pandemic really heightened this a lot, but social media allow Black clinicians to encourage healthy conversations and safe spaces. So they've done this through social media, other media platforms to promote and empower prioritizing mental health. So I feel like over the span from 2019 up until now, this has truly increased and enhanced, where we've been able to provide that access of just knowledge in terms about mental health. Increase access to resources. So social media has also been a place and an opportunity to share and provide mental health resources for the Black community. So now we have tons of directories, tons of resources that have led us to finding clinicians, finding group counseling, or finding a group practice, or whatever we need in terms of supporting our mental wellness. Again, the global pandemic, um, we were able to see or continue to see racial injustices as well. So we were forced to see the Black community prioritize mental health and emotional wellness. We had to ideally come together and create some form of community to support each other, as we were not only dealing with the pandemic, but also facing in real time those racial injustices. We've also had more recognition. So, formally recognized in June 2008, BB Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Awareness, which is now known as the BIPOC Mental Awareness Month, which happens in July, was focused to raise awareness of challenges that affect mental health and racial and ethnic minority groups. And the BIPOC term has also become more distinct and more popular in terms of making sure that people of color have access and have an understanding as well of mental health and how it can affect them, the challenges that come with it, but also how they can progress with their mental wellness. And then, in addition to this, I feel like we have been able to have more culturally competent providers. And so, what that looks like is culturally affirming and responsive mental health treatment is a way of addressing the disparities in psychological well-being in the Black community. So we've been able to really focus on having practice cultural humility and have more affirming and cultural responsive care. And so we operate from a lens from culturally, trauma focused, whatever is needed specifically for that individual. That is something that we're definitely prioritizing when we are in practice. Okay, so mental health disparities in the Black community. So we also are aware of this, and we've heard a few things that are associated with this. So in terms of disparities, I want you to think about a few things, and as you see these statistics here, do any of these statistics, I'm sorry, on the screen stick out to you? Is anything familiar to you? I know for a lot of people they are aware of the stats, and some people are not. So any of these stats look familiar to you or are new to you that you're seeing on the screen. And please also share if you relate to any of the stats that are on the screen. So, one that I hear often, 1 in 5 Americans will experience a mental illness in his or her lifetime. That is a true statistic. In addition to that, stats tell us that 25% of African Americans will seek mental health treatment compared to 40% of white Americans or their white counterparts. And I'll point out to why this is. This we'll get more into this into the next slide, but a lot of this has to do with accessibility in terms of insurance, geographic location. Uh, it really depends on where you are. Someone just responded in a comment said 1 in 5. Yeah, 1 in 5 Americans. So every 1 to 5 people you count, they will experience some mental illness in their lifetime. And that can look like anxiety, depression, just a range of things in terms of stress and triggers. And so, that is a stat that is very surprising sometimes, I find, to other clients or other individuals that are learning about emotional wellness. Research suggests that the root of the mental health stigma amongst Black people can be traced back to slavery. At that time, it was commonly thought enslaved people were not sophisticated enough to develop depression, anxiety, or other mental health disorders. So, this is always a really interesting statistic for me because, when you think about all of the traumatic experiences that we have had in history in our lifetime, we were told that it was not sophisticated, or we were not sophisticated enough to identify with that. And so, in turn, it has led to the Black community to identify those feelings and those issues, as obviously stress or even being tired, like, "Oh, I'm just tired," and making us dismiss those emotions and feelings instead of addressing them. And so this has made Black Americans have a difficulty acknowledging and recognizing psychological difficulties. So a lot of times when I've seen clients, it can be hard for them to navigate or even label or identify emotions and feelings because they're not used to actually communicating and talking about them, or they don't know how to identify them or label them themselves. And so that's an important point that I want to make. If it's not of common practice, it can be very difficult. And so even if someone says, "I'm just tired," it's important to, if you're a clinician, it's important, or a provider, it's important to dive a little bit deeper into what tired looks like to that individual. What are they feeling? What are they experiencing on a day-to-day basis? Research suggests that adult Black in the adult Black community is 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems such as major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. So I have seen an uptick in this, especially during the global pandemic. Again, in the Black community, it could be hard to identify how this feels, and so when it's finally labeled, even the client or the patient can be surprised that this is a diagnosis that may be associated with their emotions or feelings. And lastly, unequal access to healthcare due to racial inequality or social economic challenges. So I briefly, discussed this, where if you don't have, equal access to certain things around you, or accessibility, whether it's virtually, wherever you live geographically, or based off of other social economic challenges, it can be difficult to try to make mental health a priority. Okay. In addition to this, researchers believe that racial trauma is one of the reasons Black people in some communities have higher rates of PTSD compared to white people. So I see this really in the corporate setting, in the corporate world. Again, a lot of the times when you're dealing with racial injustices, or racial issues, especially in the workplace, again, it can be hard to label and identify. That's exactly what you're experiencing, that racial trauma. So it can be very difficult, and you can have those issues of PTSD, or anything else, induced anxiety as well, when you are in the workplace or anywhere else. Okay, Black emerging adults. Uh, Ages 18 to 25 also experience higher rates of mental health problems and lower rates of mental health service utilization compared to white emerging adults or older Black adults. And so, utilizing these services, you can have these experiences, but utilizing the services can be lower. Research has also found that the lack of cultural responsiveness from the therapist, cultural mistrust, or potential negative views from the therapist or a therapist associated with stigma can impact how anyone approaches mental health in the Black community. So this is something that I've experienced with clients as well. When we talk about racial trauma, sometimes it can be from other providers. And so I've had clients share, I feel like the provider wasn't able to meet me where I was, or they weren't able to connect what I'm experiencing, and I have some trauma from that, and so now I have mistrust in terms of who is showing up in the mental health community, or even with other providers, whether it's doctors, or in any form of practice. So I've certainly experienced that in terms of clients feeling like that's a major disparity for them. Someone just shared, "Thank you, very informative, important information on mental health disparities. Thank you." Thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing that comment. If you have ever experienced at any point in terms of mental health, or from any provider in terms of a disparity, and felt like you've had to deal with some of these issues, not only feel free to share, but I want to extend this safe space for you, and share that I'm sorry that you experienced that, because I know it can be very difficult, and it's difficult to navigate services in general. So to have to deal with that, I know can certainly be a reason why individuals have mistrust. Okay. And then negative attitudes and beliefs towards people who live with mental health conditions is pervasive within the US and can be particularly strong within the Black community. And so, where do we get these negative attitudes and beliefs? Again, this is rooted within our history and our historical experiences. How we view being, you know, how we view mental health and how we view emotions can be coined as many terms as we've heard within our community. As I've heard the term weak. I didn't want to look weak. I didn't want to feel like I was not providing. Something I hear commonly, especially amongst men, but also Black men, is that, I have to be a provider. I have to provide. So I don't have time to be immersed in my emotions and my feelings. And so they feel like sometimes they don't have the space to actually do that. They have those negative attitudes and beliefs because that may be a part of their upbringing or somebody has told them that. So that's just one example. One study showed that 63% of Black people believe that a mental health condition is a sign of personal weakness. As a result, people may experience shame about having a mental illness or worry that they may be discriminated against due to their condition. So, this is not only just amongst other races, but this is within our own community. And so, a lot of individuals I find don't feel safe to share that they're experiencing emotions or heightened feelings because of what it brings from maybe other people or how they feel they will be viewed, whether it's at work, within their family, um, within any group. But this is how we have shown up. Instead of sometimes supporting that individual, we may have our own negative biases or project other negative experiences or feelings onto that person where they don't feel like they can share. And so when I work with clients and individuals, I hear this feedback about, well, if I share this with my family, this will be the response because this is looked as a sign of weakness. And then again, unequal access to healthcare is one major contributor to this disparity. Nearly 10% of Black people in the US do not have health insurance compared to 5.2% of non Hispanic white people. And so, again, having that access to healthcare, having health insurance, navigating if you need health insurance, for example, or you're in limbo in terms of you're in between jobs or maybe you were laid off or it's hard for you to get a job, and understanding the access that you have to insurance in your particular state can be very hard to navigate. So let's talk about deconstructing the stigma and cultural considerations. So our goal here is to not only talk about the statistics, but also how can we deconstruct this stigma in our community. So destigmatizing mental health can be achieved by helping people, especially in the Black community, to understand that mental health is an essential part of well-being. So just like a healthy diet, sleep, exercise, it should be a part of your everyday experience. And this is something that I push to my clients anytime that we discuss mental health and destigmatizing and minimizing that myth. Okay, deconstructing that myth. It's extremely important to say this is just as in health important. I see a comment. I am from Africa, and we have the same stigma on mental health. It is seen as a weakness, admitting to mental health struggles can get the family ostracized. I'm sorry, I went to the wrong slide. And can result in daughters not getting husbands and sons not getting wives, etc. Thank you for sharing this comment, especially in your culture in terms of you being from Africa. And it is very similar. If are presented with someone, or someone shares that they have a mental health condition or concern, sometimes you think about, is this hereditary or is this manageable? And again, like you said, you can be ostracized from either that family or the community. And so again, that entices people to not share. It's important too with this to increase the discussion around mental health and wellness. So increase that conversation. Again, we talked about excuse me, safe spaces and how to navigate safe spaces and why that's important. And luckily, I'm sorry, excuse me, social media has granted us more access in terms of where is a safe space where I can connect with a clinician or even a group to talk about mental health. Sorry. In addition to this, providing an inclusive and safe space. So we just discussed that like what does a safe space really look like in terms of discussing our mental health and mental wellness. Seeing a comment here, thank you for sharing this. Reconstructing the myth is very important. How do you do this? So we'll get into this in the next couple of slides of how you can have helping solutions in terms of reconstructing this myth. So one, I want to highlight one person, one individual who's extremely popular and also a Howard alum, Taraji P. Henson. So she really honed in and focused on mental health in the Black community by creating a foundation, the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, which is in honor of her father who suffered from mental health challenges after his service in Vietnam to help address this issue. So the foundation really is focused on combating the stigma surrounding mental health in the Black community and increases access to cultural competent therapists through the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation a resource guide and also provides scholarships to students of color interested in psychology or other psychological professions. And so I love that she really dove really deep into mental health, especially her being a public figure. It was very helpful for someone of her magnitude to really highlight mental health and to try to deconstruct this stigma. And she also started a live podcast on Facebook Watch called Peace of Mind with Taraji, where she highlights personal stories in the Black community. And they have honest and profound conversations about mental health issues, about family upbringings, about traumatic experiences, and what and how that shapes and forms us today, and also how we are addressing it in terms of how are we addressing our mental health. And so she is really focusing on dismantling um, the stigma of mental health in in the Black community. So I wanted to highlight Taraji P. Henson for this for these efforts because it's not easy, and I know that it's also not something that she's an actress. It's not something that she was particularly even knowledgeable on, but she knew that it needed the attention. So, helpful solutions in aiding to progress Black mental health. And so, we'll talk about what this looks like as a clinician, and then also, as an individual just living in the world, as a patient, as a client. And so, as a client, it's important to again increase communication. So, ask questions. I have heard from many clients and individuals, especially, for example, in the maternal health world. As we know, in with Black maternal health, we know that the mortality rate it is very high. And so, one of the myths or deconstructing the myths is that they feel like they can't access many questions or ask about procedures or ask why a certain procedure is taking place. And so, I always encourage and help clients understand that you can advocate for yourself, and what advocacy looks like. And also, let's explore what advocacy feels like. And so, an example of this is ask your provider about efforts they are making to provide care to diverse patients or clients. With these rates, with these mortality rates, how are you supporting clients within my community? What does that look like? How are you culturally addressing my needs? Because these are my concerns, these are my fears. And so I always encourage clients and individuals to share these conversations with their providers. And if it's the right provider, they'll be able to respond to you appropriately and be receptive. Okay. Share stressors and concerns or fears. Inquire with the provider about treatment modalities and if it aligns. So whenever you are dealing with a clinician or a provider and they're working with you and they share some intervention that they're going to use, ask about that intervention. Is there a name for that intervention? What does this intervention mean and how does it support me? These are questions that you can ask to a provider. And again, if they're a culturally responsive and attentive provider, they will be receptive to that. And if you're ever given pushback where you feel that the provider is being reluctant to share or not being receptive, um, please feel empowered to say, you know what, I thank you for trying to support me, but as of right now, we may not be a right fit for each other, and continue to try to look for a provider that does support you. You have every right to do that. And so I always want to empower clients to feel that they can do that. Seek attention from someone who is aware and affirming of your intersecting identities. Okay, so these are things such as race, class, gender, anything that supports you as an individual, cultural background. So don't feel that you can. I'm sorry. Don't feel that you cannot find a provider that is truly going to support every aspect about your needs. Okay. I'm sorry, and I want to go back to with this, in addition to this, practice mindfulness. And I also want to add to this and continue to connect. And so when I say connect, that goes with increasing conversation. Talk to your colleagues, your friends, your family members about how you are navigating finding the right provider or the questions that you are asking. Again, when we're able to connect and increase that conversation, we're able to share and compare stories. We're able to share and compare responses and share, oh, I experienced this or I experienced that, or that's not necessarily right. Let's see if we can act this way. And so we get into an avenue of being problem oriented or solution oriented and problem solving together as a community. And so that's important, and why it really is imperative that we increase that conversation with those around us. So, as a provider, it's important to provide cultural affirming and competent care. And so, with this, as a provider, I don't assume just because I'm Black that I understand and know all cultures. I want to make sure that I am continuously learning, always continuing my education. And so, providers and clinicians are part of our practice is making sure that we are most up to date with every clinical term, clinical understanding in terms of how to meet the client's needs. And so it's important that we practice cultural humility, which means ongoing learning. Yes, we're going to practice competence, but we have to make sure that we are going to continue to learn about different different interventions and how they are going to support our clients as they matriculate through life, technology, all the different things that make us grow and improve. And so we want to make sure that we're doing the same thing. And address the stigma or fear of the individual and help to identify solutions. So allow yourself to have those open conversations with your clients or your patients, and be receptive and be solution oriented with them. Don't ever take personally as a provider when uh, when a client or a patient shares their fears or shares some feedback or shares something that they've seen. Don't ever take it personally. It's not about us, right? It's about them. And so be open-minded to those fears and the things that they share with you, and try to help them find solutions to addressing them. Provide a community care model to support Black patients, to empower and encourage a supportive network. So, again, this is what I talked about in terms of having those conversations with community, connecting that client or patient with a community group or support group where they can have conversations around their fears or concerns. And this will also help, again, deconstruct that stigma that we don't talk about things. We can talk about these things and what they mean to us and how they make us feel. Provide resources beyond the office. So again, these are those support groups. These are other groups in terms. One resource that I just told an individual that I work with. I'm also a military spouse. And so I also work with military and military spouses. And I say, another great resource that's right at the tip of your fingertips are those Facebook groups. In those Facebook groups, there are individuals that share stories and give feedback on a ton of things if you need guidance on a particular topic or subject. And so, and you can also share something anonymously. So if you don't feel like you can share with your face, that's understandable. Share it anonymously. There will be many people to give you feedback or, give you some type of rundown of how to address the issue. So that's just one example of how you can provide those resources beyond the office. Increase self-awareness. So be aware of your own biases and beliefs. So, we're clinicians, we are, providers, but we're also human. And so we may address a certain issue or even a certain client or patient, or we might question some things, or, we're not sure about just based off of our own beliefs or our own biases. And so again, when you have that, it's important to check in and consult with other providers or clinicians so that we can get some guidance around be able to navigate with that client, or we can refer the client out to, a more sufficient or effective practitioner. Okay. And to my note, consult when necessary. I always say consult, consult, consult. It's, you're never too high up to have a consultation or to have a conversation with another provider or clinician about how to do it, how to problem solve. You're not alone in this, right? So we're in this together, and you don't have to be the one that has the only right answers, right? We can get that feedback from other providers or clinicians to help guide us, support that client or patient. So together, we can understand the strength in unity and healthy conversations. So again, when we come together and we have these conversations, it's a healthy thing. It's a positive thing. And so we want to acknowledge that, and that, we can create a sense of community in making sure that we dismantle the stigma in terms of negative aspects of mental health in the Black community. We can emphasize community support and showcase successful initiatives. So, again, that's community health initiatives, peer group supports, as mentioned. We can highlight resources available to support the Black community. So, some of these resources I'll share at the end of my slide, actually. And there are tons of additional resources connected to these resources in terms of how you can truly connect to groups or individuals within the Black mental health space, and stress the significance of being active in civic engagement. So, what that means is getting involved in your state, your local or state government. So, understand what's happening around you. Understand, hey, if we're dealing with this issue or this problem, how is the state or, the city addressing the issue? And so you can also get involved in that way and understanding just the policies and procedures that are in place to support you as an individual and give that feedback. In conclusion, mental health in the Black community is continuing to make strides. So I want to acknowledge that, because just being a clinician, just in general and in the Black space, I've seen it enhance, I've seen it progress. And we are having more conversations, and I'm very excited about it. And so we just have to continue to have those conversations and to practice culturally responsive care to support the Black community. We must continue learning. We must continue to consult with other providers so that we can understand how to fully support our community. We should also share stories, connect, and share resources to continue to dismantle the myth of Black mental health in the Black community. Okay. And before we move on to just sharing some resources, I saw a lot of feedback. I thank you for sharing the feedback and sharing your stories or things that you identify with in the slides. Are there any questions or any concerns that any of you want to share before we end today? Okay. Thank you. Someone shared saying thank you, and thank you for being here. As we close out and share resources, I hope this information was helpful for you. Again, we are actively making sure that we enhance mental health conversations in the Black community. It's extremely important. I see one comment says oftentimes religion is a key factor as to why our community does not seek support. Any thoughts on that? Thank you for sharing that question. So I've learned that religion can be a key factor of how we view mental health. And so, I never, as a clinician, I never want to sway, obviously, a person in terms of religion, but I really want to understand what their goal is. Okay. So, when it comes to religion, I like to understand with mental health what it means to them to address their emotions or to address their needs. And so, again, it's important to help that individual navigate religion and also how they are feeling because at the end of the day, I say, if you have to go to the doctor, whether you go to Western medicine or you go to a holistic doctor, you still are going to somehow address your health needs. And so mental health is the same way. So, how do you want to address how you're feeling or how you're dealing with your emotions? And what does that mean for you in terms of your religion? And so, it's important for you to find a provider that can connect and understand that because those can be things that, hinder you from addressing your mental health concerns. And so, I'm really glad you brought that up. That's a really important point to make. And, if you are feeling like, my religion says this and they say that, addressing my mental health concerns or this, I say, find a provider where you can ask those questions and what it can look like for you in terms of addressing your emotional wellness, if that's important to you. And so you can ask those questions like, hey, I know my religion says this and this is how I strongly feel, but I also know that emotionally I feel this way. And so see how the clinician can support you through both aspects because it's important that you feel supported in both realms in terms of your religion and your emotional wellness. Thank you for sharing that question. Anyone else have any feedback? Thank you. Great presentation. Very informative. Thank you so much for sharing that comment. And thank you for being here. We have another question. How do you find a Black therapist? Is there a national website to assist in locating someone in your area? Great question. So there should be a national website. You're absolutely right. But there are a ton of directories that I will actually share in the slides towards the end where you can, for example, one example is Therapy for Black Girls. So they have a directory that's based off of state, also filtered in insurance where you can find a provider that you feel like connects with you most. And so I'll share that at the end as well. So that you have that available to you. But I think we're moving towards hopefully getting something nationally. That would be really great. But it seems like there's a lot of different websites that have a lot of that information in terms how to find a therapist of color or a Black therapist to meet your needs. Another question that just came in. Do you have an experience with mental health and pre-menopause and menopause? Yes, I absolutely do. So actually, probably in 2021, 2022, I saw probably 30% of my client base were women that were experiencing premenopause or menopause experience, experiences or responses, and it was very interesting because they were having trouble at work. They were having trouble navigating, problem solving maybe with family members or individuals at work, feeling emotionally, well or feeling their best self. And we ended up realizing that you do have to rule out medical concerns or medical diagnosis, that's what they were experiencing, those premenopausal, menopausal responses. And it was a very heightened topic because a lot of women could not correlate that their emotional well-being was being affected by their health concerns in terms of being premenopausal or menopause. And so I've had to provide that cycle education to women to help them understand how to find the balance in terms of gaining that emotional wellness or getting that emotional wellness back as they go through that transition. So that was a very heightened um, population that I ended up working with, just helping them navigate that, your emotional needs and wellness are a priority right now because you are going through this transition. And so I'm glad that we were able to recognize that. So, really great question. Thank you for bringing that up. Anyone else have any questions or feedback? All right, thank you. So, as you see here, there's a QR code where you can provide some feedback in a survey. There's our link there. You can click it there on the screen as well. Please give out some feedback and let us know how we're doing. I hope this topic was something where you were able to learn from and you can take it and share with your colleagues or other providers. But we would love to hear from you and love to hear your feedback and how we're really enhancing the conversation with mental health. So thank you for being here, for participating, and for sharing your stories in terms of how you've been addressing mental health. All right. And last thing, here are some resources I wanted to leave with you. Again, some of these resources already have where you can get those directories that someone already mentioned, where you can find Black clinician or clinician of color, Mental Health America, the National Allegiance of Mental Health, Black Mental Wellness, Black Mental Health Alliance, Safe Black Space, Therapy for Black Girls, Black Men Heal, Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective, and the NAACP Health and Wellness, Health and Wellbeing as well. So these are just a few resources that can lead you to really a whole slew of other resources as well, and getting connected with with other mental health resources, providers that can show up in the space for you. All right. Again, thank you all for being here. It was lovely speaking with everyone and doing this presentation for you. I hope that this increased your mental wellness and emotional battery as well. And I hope this added a bit of joy and just information to your day. So everyone, take care.